Judge's Corner is brought to you by CoolStuffInc.com and GatheringMagic.com. Support our show by visiting both websites. Now it's time for Judge's Corner with David Green.
Hi, and welcome back to Judge's Corner. In this episode, we're going to be talking about priority and how it works. So, what is priority? Priority is something that players have whenever they want to play spells or abilities during their turn or even their opponent's turns. And it's how we decide if we're going to be moving forward in the game, such as advancing in steps or phases, or even advancing the turn altogether. So priority basically means I have the option to play something or not play something, and I have to pass priority to you if you want to play something as well. Priority is different from the stack in that the stack is where things go when I have priority to play them, and priority is the ability to play things onto the stack or not play things onto the stack, in addition to also being able to advance the game. So let's take a look at a really simple example of priority. Here it's the beginning of my turn in my main phase, and I want to attack you. I say, hey Joe, let's go to combat so I can attack you. You say, okay, fine. Right there we had a huge pass of priority where I said, I want to keep passing priority till we go to combat, and you said, that's fine, I'll agree to that, let's pass priority and go to combat. So we actually we passed priority back and forth during the main phase, and we passed priority again during the beginning of combat step until we reached the declare attacker step. So that was pretty simple. Let's take a look at a more complex example. So it's my turn during my main phase, and I play Liliana of the Veil. My opponent decides to play Cancel to counter the spell, and I'm okay with that. It gets countered, and it's my main phase still, and I'm sitting there wondering what I'm going to play next. Well, that seemed really simple, but there's a lot more than meets the eye there. For example, it was my main phase, I was the active player, I had priority. I used it to put a spell onto the stack. The spell didn't instantaneously resolve, so I had to pass priority to my opponent to see if it would. He used his newfound priority to play a counterspell targeting my card. The spell resolved because he had to pass priority to me. I had to pass priority back to him because I had nothing to respond with, and then the topmost card on the stack resolved. When it resolved, the active player got priority again, and then since Liliana is no longer there, it's not going to resolve because it was countered. And here I am, the active player, sitting in my main phase with nothing to do, wondering what I'm going to do next. So, what happens if I play Liliana, and instead of countering it, it resolves? I play Liliana, I pass priority to my opponent, he passes back, the topmost spell resolves, and then the active player has priority. Here, a common misconception usually occurs. My opponent might think, well, now I can Searing Spear your head and redirect it to Liliana. But the problem is, they don't have priority. Sure, they can do that eventually, but as the active player with priority, I could activate Liliana's plus abilities or minus abilities before you even have a chance to play a spell or ability, because I have priority to put my abilities or spells on the stack, and because adding or subtracting loyalty counters is a cost of activating those abilities, that'll happen before the ability even resolves. So if you want a Searing Spear, you're going to have to wait until I pass priority to you. So there are a few times when players don't receive priority, such as players don't receive priority during the untap step, and players typically don't receive priority during the cleanup step, but there are a few exceptions to this rule. So here we have a Doomed Traveler, and our opponent decides to play during their main phase a deadweight on it. We respond by playing Giant Growth because we really want our Doomed Traveler to survive until the end of the turn, but eventually when we reach that cleanup step, that Doomed Traveler is going to end up being a -1/-1 when the +3/+3 is wiped away from it. So, how does it even go to the graveyard if state-based actions can't be passed or checked because there's no passive priority? Or, what about its ability that would trigger? Well, there's a special thing about state-based actions. Normally, they check just before a player would receive priority, but during the cleanup step, they also check one last time as the turn is going to an end. Also, triggered abilities that would be put on the stack during the cleanup step do get put on the stack. Everything happens like normal, players can respond to it with instants or abilities, and then after it's all finished and the stack is empty, a whole nother cleanup step happens, and it will keep happening until no other abilities are put on the stack and it completely finishes cleaning everything up and the next turn begins. So, a few other cool interactions with priority would be, for example, when a phased out card phases in or phases out, and something triggers because of that. The trigger, or anything that would be put on the stack during the untap step, actually gets held off until we reach the upkeep. Another cool example is Split Second. Anything with Split Second resolves and is put on the stack just like any other card, But when priority is passed, players can't really do anything with that priority, unless they have a special action card, such as flipping a morph card face up. Special actions can only be taken when you have priority, but they don't use the stack. So you could flip a face down Willbender face up with a split second card on the stack and change the target of it to something else. And finally, we have mana abilities. Mana abilities don't use the stack as well, but they can only be activated when you have priority. Mana abilities are things that produce mana, don't target, and are not loyalty abilities. So we covered some cool interactions with priority. Let's take a look at some complex interactions with combat. So when is the last chance that you can stop your opponent from attacking with a creature, or stop them from dealing damage with a creature? Well, the last chance you can stop them from attacking is during the beginning of combat step before the declare attacker step. You'd have to play a spell like Murder or something to tap their creatures before they actually declare them as an attacker. And what if you wanted to stop your opponent from dealing damage to you? The last chance we'd be able to do anything is during the declare blocker step, after the turn-based action of declaring blockers, just before damage would be dealt when your opponent passes priority to you. With this priority, we'd cast spells like Fog or Murder. So hopefully now you have a really good understanding of how priority works. Priority is just a bunch of passes back and forth throughout the turn, and in fact it happens so often we don't even acknowledge the passes most often. It's important for knowing when you can and can't play things, but we basically chop this up to, hey, I'm going to respond with this, hey, I want to do this, hey, I want to end my turn. And even saying that means I want to pass priority to you a bunch of times until we reach the end of my turn, in which it's now your turn, unless you play something. So with that, we basically are done, but before we move forward, let's take a look at some questions that were asked by our viewers. So Nathan Dortmund had asked, if his opponent uses Lobbercrew to deal him 1 damage during the end of turn, when is the last chance, and can he even play Avenging Arrow to get rid of it? Well, you can, and the last chance you have is also during the end step, when you have priority. And even if you were to play it during the cleanup step by some miracle, it still could be played because the creature is considered to have dealt damage for the turn throughout the entire duration of the turn. Our next question comes from Timothy Orr. And before I go any further, I'd like to apologize if I've butchered any of your names. So, Tim asked, if he has a Master Biomancer on the battlefield and plays a Silverheart, what happens? Biomancer's static ability alters how things enter play. So when the Silverheart comes into play, it'll already have +2/+2 from +1/+1 counters. Then its triggered ability will make Biomancer +4/+4 bigger, which is already too late to make it +4/+4 from Biomancer alone. Biomancer will be a 6/8, Silverheart will be a 10/10, and everything played after will get 6 counters from Biomancer. So this concludes our episode. If you have any questions, make sure to send them to judgescorner@gatheringmagic.com. And until next time, prioritize your time wisely, and remember that magic is a priority, and have fun.